Hello, and welcome to the podcast. Today we're discussing Godzilla Final Wars from 2004 and the last film in the Millennium series.
Aren't you going to introduce me?
Oh, yeah. I didn't introduce myself either. And today it is Adam Winters, and I am Joe Gould. And I think we'll have similar thoughts about this movie, but we'll find out in a few minutes.
I come not to defend Godzilla Final Wars, but I do come to appreciate it.
I want to blame the director more than the writers. I don't think the script itself was that bad in the hands of a good director, because this movie was, let me get this right, 125 minutes. That is by far, until Shin Godzilla, that is by far the longest Japanese Godzilla movie. And there's a reason why these things should be clocking in at 90 minutes.
I'll agree with you on that one.
Because Toho will never have the budget to support a 2-hour Godzilla movie.
And I felt
they don't have the money for it.
I felt every one of those 125 minutes, even through the credits. It starts, to be fair, with a pretty good little encounter with Godzilla right off the bat, as I think every one of the Millennium series movies has done. And then we don't see Godzilla again, I think, until the 1 hour, 5-minute mark, something like that. So we do have about 65 minutes where Godzilla is an agent doing something in this movie. But he's also in it far less than I remember.
Really, all the monsters are in it far less than anyone would remember. I mean, it's really almost 2 movies.
It is indeed.
I mean, it could have been 2 movies, honestly, and it probably would have been, I don't know if it'd been better, but it would have been probably easier to watch, broken up in half.
But, well, part of this movie feels like it was ripe to be a Disney Plus show before that was a thing.
Maybe.
So, yeah, it does feel like there's a side story that we walk into, and yet somehow Godzilla monsters appear in this ongoing series that we just walked into.
Yeah. So I found a review off this website called Alternate Ending, which I love their tagline: discovering good movies, one bad movie at a time.
Fair enough.
So Tim Brayton wrote this review back in 2014, and there's a couple of paragraphs which I think kind of summarize a lot of this movie. Well, first off, we talked about how polarizing the movie is, and some people love it, some people hate it, but the people who love it are definitely not as passionate as the people who hate it. So here's what he says: if Final Wars has more than its share of good ideas, that's in no small part because it has so many ideas, period. Writer-director Kitamura Ruhai apparently lacks whatever filter it is that causes other directors to limit themselves only to the scenes, characters, and concepts that can fit into an individual movie, going instead for a film that contains basically everything it can't in its very indulgent 125-minute frame, by a considerable margin, the longest Japanese Godzilla film ever. It's a grab bag of narrative and aesthetic notions jammed all together with no sort of reflection or restraint. And while this gives the movie a deeply appealing anything can happen sense of scope and popcorn and movie energy, it also makes it an exhausting thing to watch, building up no momentum to speak of as it flits from one thing to the next, mixing styles and moods without stopping to notice that this makes those 125 minutes pass by very slowly indeed.
Well, I wouldn't quite say it doesn't build momentum. I think it does. The momentum just doesn't quite roll the way you think it's going to. Maybe that's what I'm coming at.
And then just a few more sentences from a different spot in the article. This thing is, for reasons best known to himself... Alright, sorry, rephrase that. The thing is, for reasons best known to himself, Kitamura wasn't interested in just making a Godzilla film. He apparently wanted to make some kind of unholy hybrid of Godzilla, The Matrix, and Star Wars. The result is that human battles involving a lot of wire work and such take up far more of the movie's running time than anything to do with Godzilla and friends at all. Some of the human battles are perfectly fine. Most of them aren't. And even at their best, it's a palpable, irritating waste of time. And budget, I'd say, too.
It was a box office bomb, according to what I read on Wikipedia. It did not make its budget back in Japanese theatrical bank.
No, it was. I mean, I'm not sure. With Godzilla movies, you always got to take into account DVD sales and things like
Yeah.
that. So I don't know how much
Merchandising, sure.
But this one had a pretty big hole to get out of. It was.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can find it real quick. All right. Box office. It had the largest budget ever used in a Japanese Godzilla film at around $19 million.
Mm.
In its opening weekend, it came in third place with $1.8 million.
Mm.
It got beat by Howl's Moving Castle and The Incredibles. And it ended up making $12 million in the box office. So it lost $7 million. That's a lot of DVDs. I doubt they made that up. It actually premiered in Hollywood, California at the Egyptian Theater on November 29th, 2004. Had a handful of public screenings after that in the U.S., in New York City, Park Ridge, Illinois, and in Rochester, New York. And then it was released in theaters December 4th, 2004 in Japan. It also released in China and France. I'm not sure how much box office it did there, but I would imagine too much.
Interesting.
I'm not sure why France got these movies.
So they went with a Los Angeles premiere before it ever hit Japan. Very curious on that.
Well,
I wonder what they were thinking for.
Well, I'm sure it had to do with the 50th anniversary.
Oh, yeah.
So, I'm not sure. I don't know when the exact 50th anniversary is, so it may have aligned more with the November date it's only 5 days actually before, so it's not like it was out very
sure
long. It was interesting in terms of the film, and this was an odd movie. They call it like a hybrid version, but there was a lot of English actors in the movie.
And very interesting for Godzilla films, yeah.
Yes, and they did not dub the English actors over in Japanese in Japan. And it was the English dub that is recorded was done by Red Angel Media in Hong Kong. I think that's the same one they use for all their movies. But yeah. And then it was released in DVD in 2005, and then in Blu-ray in 2004, on Blu-ray in 2014, and that lined up with one of the Legendary releases.
Oh, I didn't know they came out like that at the same time. Huh, I missed that. The Blu-ray release.
Yeah, well, that's what I got. I think they just did it. Well, it's a good time to re-release it in Blu-ray, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a mess of a movie.
And yet it's a delightful mess. Once you accept everything for what it is, it's quite a ride. Captain Gordon? You know, I think about Jesse Ventura. The actor's name is Don Frye, spelled funny with a Y-E, but he has the demeanor of a 80s Jesse Ventura, and as for the voice, it reminds me a lot of Sam Elliott. And I also think if they ever adapted the Final Fight video game series and they wanted to cast a live-action Mike Hagar, Frye is your guy.
I thought that too. He's definitely a Hagar type. There's a few other MMA guys that had mustaches like that and similar builds and haircuts back in that era that probably could have done the same. But no, I mean, so he was an MMA fighter.
Oh.
And then he also did do pro wrestling in Japan for New Japan Pro Wrestling for a little while.
So that's his connection to Japan market then. He's something of a minor celebrity because of his wrestling pedigree. Yeah,
so he was a celebrity in Japan, and I don't know what they paid him, but he obviously did not bring in the buck. It would be curious to see if, would this movie have done worse if he hadn't been in the movie? But I don't know.
Don't know.
As a odd little reference point, so he was, and you may not know who this is, you may know, but you may. So he, in terms of wrestling, he was trained by Mr. Perfect, Kurt Hennig.
I wouldn't be able to ID him on a photo gallery, but I've heard the name, Mr. Perfect.
Yeah, this movie, see if there's any little side notes that should be mentioned. So it's the 28th mainline Godzilla film. So 28th one by Toho. It was
the final for a long time.
Yeah, it was the 6th and final in the Millennium series. They had decided prior to this movie coming out that it was going to be the last movie for 10 years. They were going to give it a break.
Mm.
Obviously, they were not tempted to do otherwise after the box office came in. And it also features the most kaiju in any Godzilla film to date. And I would imagine that still holds, like, off the top of my head.
I'm looking at the back of my DVD. I'm seeing 19 trademarked kaiju icons on it. Although they kind of cheat with Monster X, King Ghidorah. They're counting him twice.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a good number. Although to me, this is the 21st century take on Destroy All Monsters, which in my mind is the last movie of the Showa era, but it's not chronologically. But it's supposed to be set at the end of the 20th century, and so it's in universe. It's supposed to take place at the end of the Godzilla timeline, and Toho was throwing all of the suits that could still be worn into this film, even if it was just a lame cameo. So I'm guessing Destroy All Monsters has more, but I don't know that they use them near as much.
Yeah, I'm not sure on that. I do think that they may have reused some of those suits again. I don't know. Some of these costumes are pretty bad. 18 million just doesn't go that far these days.
Some of the monsters are purely CGI in this, though. Two of them come to mind, I'm pretty sure, are entirely CGI.
Yeah, it was a weird mix. I don't typically enjoy these Millennium films when they do the mix and matching of the CGI and the practical effects for the monsters. I think it doesn't. I don't think it works well together. Their budget's not good enough. The suits the physical. It's like the physical suits look better. So when they're interacting with these CGI things, it looks like it literally does look like graphics from mid-2000s video games on the cutscenes.
And of course, they have an underwater shot again in this movie, where the main spaceship that's sort of an all-terrain vehicle, the Gotengo, which is a throwback to the Showa era, but it was never in any Godzilla films. Do you recall where that spaceship with the drill debuted? I've never seen it.
I think I read about it.
I want to say the name of the movie is Aardvark or something, but Atragon. It's something weird. But I remember those ships because they were in the Nintendo video game a lot. So that was their way of integrating it into the Godzilla franchise early on.
Yeah. So I think we should take a little different approach with this movie. This would be a 4-hour podcast if we went kind of scene by scene.
Woo, let's not do that.
I'm just going to read a summary, which I think clarifies pretty much the entire plot of the movie, with the exception that it leaves out the fact that they're mutants. We can flesh out the mutant part.
Of course they are.
So let me just read this, and this is from the Wikizilla page. The final Godzilla film for a period of 10 years, Final Wars commemorates the 50th anniversary of the franchise, featuring the most kaiju in any Godzilla film to date. In the year 20XX, monsters have suddenly begun attacking major cities around the globe. An alien force known as Exilians teleports the monsters away and claims to have come to save the human race. However, members of the Earth Defense Force learn that the Exilians are really trying to infiltrate positions of power in human society. The EDF exposes their plan, leading the evil controller of Planet X to unleash all of the monsters against humanity once more. Mankind's last hope lies with a few remaining EDF soldiers who use the warship Gotengo to free Godzilla from his prison in Antarctica so he can defeat the Exilians' legion of kaiju all by himself. So I think the thing that leaves out is that within the Earth Defense Force, you have a subdivision. What did we decide it was called? It was M...
You said organization. M organization.
Yeah, which is basically a bunch of mutants. And somehow they discovered these mutants. That's never explained, really, as to why they
Professor
just popped up.
Xavier was using Cerebro. He's on the payroll of EDF.
Yes. So throughout the movie, you have these mutants who are doing Matrix-style fighting with one another. Always
in trench coats, right? Don't they always wear them?
They got some weird tech suits that look like they came out of,
It feels like every main character in this movie has either a trench coat or a cape. Not like a Superman cape, but a a formal cape on at some point in this film.
No, yeah, I think that's fair. Don Frye, who plays Douglas Gordon, he's kind of the head up of the EDF.
Well, no.
I
Well, hold
guess
on
actually
now.
not the EDF, but the M organization.
He gets reprimanded early in the film. You remember that?
Yeah.
They put him
Well,
in a holding cell.
Yeah, I should say he's the on-screen leader, really.
There are moments in this movie where you feel like he's the main character of the film.
I'd say you have two main non-alien characters. You have Gordon, and then you have what's his name, the main mutant, Ozaki, yeah. And then you got the unnamed alien.
Mr. X, name. Right? It's just X.
I guess, or the controller. I mean, the notes call him the controller. I don't remember if that was actually. Are we talking about
the older guy or the younger guy?
All right, so we should back up on that. So the aliens, when they come to Earth, and you have some dueling ideologies. So you have the older aliens who want to use less force and kind of just win behind the scenes, win without ever picking up a weapon. Well, at some point that plan goes awry, and the younger controller dude with a weird laugh kind of takes over the plan, and that's when they release all the monsters again. So they were wanting to use that as a last resort. He's like, screw that, let's just do it up front. More fun that way.
Yeah. And the ultimate goal is they want to breed humans like cattle so that they can sustain themselves. I forget a little bit about what it was humans did for them.
Well, they need the mitochondria, remember? Oh.
So even though they've got the M-Force, or the M-base DNA, which is a concept revealed about halfway through this movie, they need the mitochondria as well. Because M-base will only get you so far in outer space, I guess. Should we get into the backstory with Gigan and Mothra?
Well, how do you want to? Yeah, we can do that. So the movie sets up pretty well, actually. So they find this mummy type monster, and they're doing some tests on it, and they figure out that it's 12,000 years old. They decide.
I thought 10,000, but whatever. Who cares?
10,000, 12,000. Yeah. Tomato. It's old, and that I can't figure out if they decided it was alien up front or not. But the little twins from Mothra show up and let everybody know that Mothra took care of this monster in the past. Its name is Gigan, and that it's I think they're the ones that said it's an alien.
Seemed like the scientist I will say explained the extraterrestrial nature of it, but yeah.
Yeah, and I will say this is the worst version of the twins I think I've heard. I meant to go back and listen to it in Japanese to see if the voices were just as annoying on the Japanese version, but the American dub of these little twins, I mean, it's horrible. They are it's like such a high pitched monotone, hurts the ears.
They decide, Mike Haggard decides, Flash Gordon, whatever you want to call him, they got to get Godzilla out of the South Pole. And so they get on Gatango, which is good. They had a secret emergency dock for Gatango after all the other mutants went mind control. So they got that ship, and they booked it on down to the South Pole, and Mr. X said, I'm sending Gigan after you. And he revitalized Gigan real quick. I would have thought Gigan was long out of repair or something, but no, he just needed to be washed off and told to wake up. And so
they need his head reattached.
Not when he wakes him up the first time, when he's in the mummy state.
Oh, I think he was fully functional. I think he was just offline.
Oh, okay. So they all meet at the South Pole, and there's a couple of dudes running the South Pole. That's the only word I got for him. One of them was named Glenn, and I don't remember the name of the other guy. But this is after the point when the space aliens have been outed because white dress lady tricked the fake UN Secretary General with a dog that wasn't his own. and that started the whole chain reaction of the lizard people
I
revealing
like that
themselves.
scene. I like that scene. It just
It,
shouldn't have been in this movie.
mm, it's a lot we got to digest before we even get to Godzilla. Because again, all this happens, and Mr. X Jr. takes over and says, "We're just going to launch all the monsters, and we're going to blow up all the major cities." And they send Rodan to New York, and they send King Caesar somewhere, and Kumunga and Kamakuris, the grasshopper. And but they send we got to at least talk about the monster they send to Sydney, Australia, right?
Well, real quick, because I don't think we'll come back to this scene. The one with Rodan, that scene, I really liked that scene, and it reminded me of the bat creature in Gremlins 2.
Oh
Like
yeah,
there was a dark humor kind of thing going on, like a very humorous vibe going on at the front of the scene that really reminded me of Gremlins. And then you got this Rodan thing coming through that really reminded me of the bat that they end up putting in concrete in the
yeah.
Gremlins movie. But so I like the tone of this scene, though I will say the effects were atrocious.
For
Rodan looks
Rodan,
so fake. The way the buildings blew up, like they were trying to do
yeah,
this effect where like he's flying so fast, and the G force is so much that it cracks the windshield, or breaks the glass. But the buildings, like instead of just having the glass shoot out of the windows, like the buildings, it did do that, but it also at the same time the buildings themselves just exploded in all directions. It was like the cheesiest looking crap ever. Like yeah, embarrassingly bad. But I like the scene as a whole. There's really nothing to go back to in that scene. It had a
yeah.
really
Other than the
good little.
police officer has been redubbed by another English-speaking actor.
Yeah. So I mean, you have interaction between a homeless drunk, you have
A pimp.
a pimp, and you have the cop having a conversation that would never happen like there. And then Rodan pops up, and they're like, "Oh shit!" And but yeah,
So, and I guess I've also forgotten that happens at the very beginning of the movie when the monsters are on the loose the first time, and the space aliens or the
oh
Exilians
yeah,
make them all disappear. But
yeah.
but then when the jig is up and the coup has taken place among the Exilians, they reset all the monsters and call Gigan. And so while all these other monsters are apparently taking out civilization in a minute, like Mr. X says, the dudes in the South Pole, whose one job is to make sure the facility runs properly so that the Godzilla stays contained, they're just sitting there thinking, well, civilization's over, but wait, we still got one ship coming. And one of the guys is saying, like, oh man, we get to continue the mission. And the other guy's like, I don't care. And then Gatengo shows up and Gigan fights, and pretty quickly Godzilla gets out of the containment unit. And the first thing Godzilla does, when you know it, does he take a shot at Gigan? No, he takes an atomic shot at the dudes working the job. I mean,
Yeah, I don't know why they did that scene. Other than, I mean, he went after the Gatenga ship also. So I mean, I'm sure he's waking up thinking he's back. There has not been a big time lapse, but then he notices Gigan over there. But no. So my thoughts on this movie is that what this movie should have been is you can keep all the Matrix stuff if you want. The mutants, like you can keep that in, but the only monster that should have been in this movie should have been Gigan.
mm,
They obviously spent most of their money on his suit, so it
yeah.
looks good. Like he
He
looks
had
good.
two
I mean,
versions of
compared to all the monsters, I mean, he was by far that had the best suit outside of Godzilla, and they were very comparable. So I think if you had just kept this as a Gigan movie with these, the mutants or the aliens, excuse me, this would have been, you could have knocked off 30 minutes of random footage. You could have increased the Gigan fight time. You could even leave Mothra in. I get it.
Yeah.
That had the little twins.
Yeah.
And it would have been a lot better of a movie. And they would have saved money on all that crappy CGI.
Probably 500 million yen at least.
Yeah.
Maybe a full billion. I don't know.
Because those were really the good scenes. Like for the most part, all the fighting with the other monsters was like just really kind of sad knockoffs of the 1970s fights.
Mm. Especially when King Caesar was involved.
Oh yeah, you had like the soccer scene, right? Is that the one with was he in that one?
Yeah. I put it up there was one of the most entertaining Godzilla fights I've ever seen. So all this is taking place right at the foot of Mount Fuji, and it's a battle royale. Godzilla, Anguirus, Rodan, and King Caesar of all people. And I will say, when King Caesar runs, I get very uncomfortable and unsettled watching him do that. There's just something about it that terrifies me when King Caesar is running. His ears animate too. I was impressed they got that. Anguirus becomes a soccer ball because he has a new attack that I think this is the first movie where he does it. He rolls up and he goes all Sonic the Hedgehog on stuff and he builds momentum. And Godzilla's able to just knock him away with his tail, and with great aim, it hits Rodan in the air, and Rodan crashes. And then Anguirus is deflected in ball form over to King Caesar, who jumps high in the air and makes an excellent form kick right at Godzilla, who for some reason, instead of trying to get out of the way, seems to jump and block Anguirus like he's protecting a goal, which then causes Anguirus to land on Rodan, I think, and I'm assuming kill Rodan. And at some point, he gets King Caesar to fall on top of Anguirus too. So he's knocked out all three of the monsters, and he made his son very happy, assuming Manila is his son in this month. Do we got to talk about Manila?
Oh, I guess we have to. Well, we at least have to talk to him about at the end. So one of the little side plots in this film
Yeah.
is you have Manila discovering this kid, a really young kid, and his crazy grandpa dressed up as like a bear who's hunting in the woods. And they spend about half the movie driving around town for no good reason, really.
In a
Eventually,
pickup
Manila,
truck.
pickup truck. So Manila's in a pickup truck, not in the
Not in the
back, by
back
the way.
end, I want to say. He's in the cab.
Yeah, and eventually Manila communicates enough for them to realize he wants to go to Godzilla. So at the very end of the movie, after Godzilla takes care of business, they manage to calm Godzilla down, or Manila manages to calm Godzilla down, and tells him to forgive humanity for all their sins. And I will say, so it did mention at the beginning, I think with through one of the Manila scenes, that the reason Godzilla is attacking the Earth is because the humans have taken such piss poor care of it, and it keeps blowing it up and setting it on fire, basically. So
it seems to be a reference to the H bomb or something like that. A bomb, atomic bomb, H bomb, whatever.
Yeah, I don't know if it was just the H bomb. I don't know. It just seems to be the motivation of this film seems to be more like because the humans have torn down the natural Earth, he's going to tear down all the civilization they build up on it. I don't know, something like that.
Okay. Yeah.
So
long time ago, humans did something that made Godzilla mad. You're too young to understand, but they set fire to everything, and Godzilla got upset and would never forgive them.
Yeah, and I probably this is probably a good point to just mention that this film may or may not have any tangible connection to the 1954 Godzilla film. They have some stock footage showing his old attack, but there's no part of the story from that film is referenced. So we don't even really know that that's how Godzilla was formed in this film.
Yeah, the opening of this movie uses footage from almost every Showa era and a few of the Heisei era films too.
Yeah.
So you have no idea what's canon and what isn't within this movie.
Yeah, which is fine. I mean, like the opening credits, though they were a little bit seizure-inducing.
King seizure-inducing.
Yeah, so lots of flashing lights and quick cuts of the camera. So if it made my head hurt, but I could tell it was some nice stuff in there. They did have a really nice lighting effect early on, right before the opening credits, where they had a side view of the Godzilla from the box art of the 50th anniversary release of the 1954 movie with one of the versions, and it's actually the picture I used, I don't want to say ripped off, but it was the source material
Yeah,
for a podcast logo, and like
yeah,
the outline was I don't know if I would have recognized it had I not worked on that logo
it's a
and
good one.
drawn it. But it was good. But it was a really nice shot. I think they managed to use the suit. You can't tell, but I think they did manage to use the suit from the movie to do it.
Hmm. So I wanted to add that after we mentioned the Mount Fuji fight, so one of the things that seems to take up a lot of time and money in this movie is that after Godzilla kills Gigan, if that's accurate, he knocks the head off Gigan at the South Pole. And then, because he still has a grudge against the Gatango and the humans, he follows the Gatango across the ocean all the way to Sydney, Australia, where he fights his doppelganger. And I ain't talking about Mechagodzilla. And then after he beats the tuna head. How do they insult him after he dies?
Well, the subtitles was different from the dub. I think the dub called him a tuna eater.
Tuna eating,
I
yeah.
think.
Okay. Tuna head, tuna eater.
Yeah.
After Sydney, they lead the ship to Papua New Guinea, where he fights the spider, Kumunga, and he gets tied up a bit, but that's fine. He goes to somewhere in Japan, Monozura, I don't know where that is, and he fights the grasshopper, Kamakuris. And then I think he goes to Mount Fuji, and at some point he's got to go fight Hedorah somewhere. That fight is sort of lost. What a poor use of Hedorah. They really did him dirty. Pun intended.
I mean, they really did all these guys dirty.
And Garrus was okay. That was fine.
Actually, they did right, and probably you could say in terms of giving people fighting, not being a weakling, and yeah, those two, and then not Mothra, Rodan.
That was fun.
And then Gigan. I mean, it's kind of a half and half kind of thing.
But just the idea that they take Godzilla on this world tour is bizarre, especially when you consider the monsters don't get deployed until after they show up.
No, this had to take forever.
The aliens teleport them down. Yeah, that's just bad pacing, I think. It doesn't make a lot of sense.
No, if you got something that doesn't make sense, you want it to take up as little screen time as possible so the audience doesn't see it. This is like over and over again. Like, what?
Yeah.
Now he's randomly here? Oh, and he's not transported. He just walks.
So I think if it was me, I would have kept the Mount Fuji scene in there for all its glorious ridiculousness. And you could have kept those three monsters or changed them out. But get rid of Kumunga and Kamakuris and Hedorah. Yeah, I can't believe he's in this movie. And I forget that he's in this movie. But, okay. Well, rant over. Yeah, there you go.
So one other thing I noticed, and it bothered me, but I'm not sure why, but there was the most odd filters on the camera for all these outdoor scenes. Like every location, like any country they were in had like the film just looked different. Some of them kind of had a vintage kind of look. Some of them were really yellow green. Some were like a red orange filter. Like when the mutants took down
they killed
the sea monster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a good scene.
Again,
I like that.
It's a good scene, but it didn't need to be in the movie.
No.
Like your movie's 2 hours and 5 minutes.
You spent a lot of budget on that stunt work, I'm sure. And
if anything, all this scene did was show that the humans could take the monsters down by themselves. Why do they need Godzilla?
I like the line that I think Kazama says when he gets up on top of Abira for the kill shot. He says it in English, and he says, "Sorry, I'm a vegetarian," and it's in the Japanese language version, so it's not just a dubbing thing. Puts the kill shot.
Well, there's no subtitle either. I was really confused on that. I kept replaying it, trying to figure out if I was just missing the subtitle. I wanted to know if that's what he said, and but why would this Japanese character say that in English in the Japanese film? Like, I have no idea.
Well, I like the vision of society. You know, we've talked about Star Wars, but there is a Star Trek quality to the society that's being portrayed here. I think the cinematography owes a lot to Star Trek. Every time you have a bridge scene, which is the way all the crew members are situated. But I think with Star Wars or Star Trek, you have this vision of a human society where all the Earth works together in harmony despite their differences and diversities. And eventually you start expanding that to the way the universe works together with all the creatures and the races and all that. So I feel like this is the strengths of this movie that doesn't get talked about enough. You have these international crew of humans and mutants working together, and they all speak different languages, and nobody has a stupid accent, but everybody understands everybody perfectly. And I think that's a Star Trek quality of a vision of humanity working in unison. So there you go.
So yeah, so I say though, my counterpoint is probably one of my final points I think I have about this movie is that is actually, to use a wrestling phrase, lazy booking. So
It might be.
my gut says they didn't bother trying to explain it because it'd be too hard to explain. I mean, have you noticed the reliance of this movie on the letter X?
Oh,
And not
yeah.
in relation to the X-Men, by the way.
Mm.
It is 2000XX. They don't even give you what year it is. You have the X-Zillions who use that term because they say it's too hard to you wouldn't you wouldn't be able to pronounce our real name, even
Yeah.
though they speak English. So
Yeah.
they're just the X-Zillions. And then you have the character and doing the interview, he says, "What's your name?" "Well, I go by X now because y'all wouldn't understand my real name." It's just like that's just lazy.
Well, maybe.
Which
But
is another example of why this movie's 2 hours and 5 minutes, because the director was lazy and didn't want to cut anything out.
so we should talk about on the X-Men. By the way, in the English dub, somebody used the term X-Man at one point in this movie. I don't recall when it happened. It was earlier rather than later. But the concept of the Kaiser, not the Caesar, not that kind of Caesar or King Caesar, but the Kaiser is supposed to be a special breed of either the mutants or the Exilians, where they can be all powerful something so long as they can tap into their real power. When the M base and the human DNA are combined, 1 in a million will result in the most powerful of living beings. And wouldn't you know it, Mr. X and Ozaki both happen to be Kaisers in development.
Yeah. Lazy booking.
Or as we know from the first Matrix movie, the one, Neo.
Only there's multiple ones.
There's a couple ones. Or maybe 3 if you count King Ghidorah's final form, Monster X. They call him Monster
Kaiser.
X, don't they?
He's Monster X, and then he turns into Kaiser Ghidorah, basically.
So there's 3 Kaisers in this movie.
Well, 4 if you count. They kind of turned Godzilla into one at the end.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they do power him up.
So I don't know if he's considered a Kaiser at that point, but he's at least got the energy.
I was confused on this.
Monster.
But so I did like the idea of Ghidorah and Gigan fighting side by side. Mothra decides to get involved. Did you want to talk about the Mothra Gigan Volume 2 battle?
Oh, so I don't want to talk about it too much, but the way they take out Gigan, I like. It reminds me of that one scene, and which one was it where he caught the bug in his mouth?
Megaguirus, right?
Yeah. So the second Millennium film, when he fought Megaguirus or Gearus,
yeah,
and he's flying with his
the stinger,
and he's trying to sting Godzilla in the head, and they had the camera shot from the back. So he makes impact, and then they reveal slowly that Godzilla caught it in his mouth, and then he bites off the stinger, killing him. So a similar, though different, effect of Gigan's got these weapons that he throws, and like boomerangs, they come back. And I'm not really sure if this scene makes sense when you think about it too hard. Again, lazy booking.
Yeah.
But he basically decapitates himself when they come back.
Yeah, I
So I
wasn't
guess
sure if that's
he
what was
thought, I
intended or not.
suppose, I guess he thought that they got impaled into Mothra, who was
Uh-huh.
doing a little special effect there. And then since they weren't, he wasn't prepared for the return. I don't know. It looked really cool, but the more you think about it, the less sense it makes. It also makes no sense that you have Gigan losing to Mothra. Like this is not like there is no and I'm talking about not in the case of which I guess is actually the second time because they opened up the movie and they said Mothra took him out. But
Probably the larval
I
form.
don't know. The only way Gigan loses to Mothra is if he loses to the little larva who
Yep.
web him up.
Yep.
Like,
Probably what
which I
happened. He
was
got
curious.
cocooned, mummified.
Well, yeah, I know it didn't look like. I was trying to figure that out because it didn't look like he was covered up in webs. So I wasn't really sure whether or not they were implying that he got cocooned by them, or if he was more like a standard mummy wrap. I don't know. I didn't like the idea of Mothra beating Gigan.
Well, it was Flaming Mothra who sacrificed herself into a beheaded Gigan. Edward Scissorhands Gigan.
Yeah.
It's pretty weird. Yeah, it is. It's a very oddly shot scene because he can still walk around without the head, but then Flaming Mothra goes right into him
With a half wing.
Yeah, or a quarter wing or something. So Gigan clearly is not able to take a lot of damage. He's all offense, no defense.
Yeah. I mean, for what it's worth, all these monsters are pretty much no defense in this movie.
Yep.
Well, I think the longest fight scene is like 3 minutes.
Yeah, they got to move on to the next one, so they can't extend it too long. So I think I want to speak a little bit that while Godzilla is fighting Monster X and Monster X Volume 2, Kaiser Ghidorah, the humans are still on the spaceship, and the main hero and the main villain, they do a martial arts battle, while the rest of the people take out the rest of the henchmen and then try to escape from the ship. That's a very confusing scene, in my opinion.
It's because it's nonsensical. Because there's no real script here, or if there was a script, there's no real director. It was the stupidest scene that took forever.
Oh, it did.
Forever. No, this movie, I cannot think of a worst directed. I'll just say Godzilla film, possibly any film, but I mean, if you just think about how poor of a job this director did in this movie, unless he was mandated to do these things by Toho,
Probably not.
It was. I mean, whatever this guy made was too much.
I read a quote on Wikipedia from the director that when he accepted the offer to direct the film due to being unsatisfied with the Godzilla films of the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, the Millennium series, he stated, "I loved the Godzilla movies back in the 70s, but not so much the one released in the 80s and 90s. Godzilla movies back in the 70s were never just monster movies. There were always messages and themes that reflected the time and the world which they were made, and they combined this so well with straight-out entertainment. They lost that touch in the 80s. And so, was
that a quote or a summary?
It's a quote in English, so that's
his
supposed to be a
runtime
direct quote.
Even the run times for his responses are 25 to 30% too long.
Woo! I will say I appreciate bringing back the space aliens and all the Planet X lore from those 70s. I think the 60s are more accurate, though. There were less space aliens in the 70s. There were a few, but the whole deal with Planet X and the visor-based aliens, that's from the early to mid-60s, I think. So that's what he should have said.
I mean, I get where he's come from. And, like, if this was two separate movies, then each of them might have been good. But, I mean, it's just, they ruined it.
I think if we'd have done one movie with the mutants and one movie with the lizard people, that might have been okay. But
Well, just make it a Gigan movie with the aliens. I mean, I don't know. They
I
screwed the
like it.
pooch. They messed this one up.
And we're not talking about Clint the Pooch. We're talking about a different kind of pooch.
Yeah. But anyways, yeah. So like I said, there's fun moments in the movie, but overall, at least 30 minutes too long.
Yeah.
Or should have been two movies. Either split it in half and add 10 minutes to each to make it work, and get two movies out of your 18 million, or cut out half the crap and make a $9 million movie. But yeah, they try to do too much. You got any final thoughts on this movie?
Well, not on this movie per se. What do you think about the Millennium series as a whole? Do we have thoughts on that?
So, all right. So I have some thoughts, but they're probably not going to be. I was asking you a similar question. So, how would you distinguish the shift in the films from the previous era to the Millennium era? Like, what do you think it accomplished or screwed up that they had going for them in the 90s?
Well, I think the accomplishments are probably two different things that add to the mythos of the franchise. Number one is the emphasis on Godzilla's unique biology, which becomes more and more focused on his regeneration abilities as opposed to just his really hard, invulnerable skin. That's something that gets developed, and in some movies it's a bigger theme than others, but that's now become a much bigger deal in Godzilla franchise lore. And the second issue is the transition of the franchise from a heavy sci-fi action focus to something that's trying to make a supernatural, spiritual connection to the characters, the monsters, Godzilla specifically. A Godzilla that has motivations that aren't always clear, but bring a moral quality into it and his reason for existing.
Okay. I consider the Millennium era to be like the Wii U, and the current era, the current era to be the Switch.
I love the Wii U.
Well, I did too. There's nice things about it, but I think what the modern era really gets right is that they are not focused so much on maintaining like a shared universe of like consistent continuity across films, over and over again.
Yeah.
But they're putting talented people in place to make Godzilla films in like their own image, or in their version, or whatever they're coming up with good Godzilla stories, but they don't have to be stories that are connected.
Mm-hmm.
I think the Millennium series attempted to do that. They just didn't do it very well.
That's true.
Or at least not consistently well.
Right.
So they did have people doing their own thing, but I don't think they got talent to do it. It's like, this is not a talented director who did this movie. Or if he's talented, he really just screwed this one up.
It's experimental, just like the Wii U was, right?
Yeah.
Even though in some ways it's a progression of some things that worked before.
Well, and this is the Millennium series was the first time in Godzilla films you had this. Everything was shared continuity, at least for the era before.
Yeah, I guess so. I'm not entirely sure about all the Heisei films going all the way back to 84, but it's real close, even if it's not.
Well, I think that is the wrap up of the Millennium series for Godzilla. I think we've agreed that for season 2, we're going to do King Kong.
Yeah, we'll go ape over that.
Yeah. So that'd be fun. That'd be good. 6, 7, 8 episodes.
Maybe we'll do a special Godzilla X Kong too at some point.
Yeah, so we'll have to talk through that. But yeah, so I think we'll be doing that pretty soon. And then, yeah. The Millennium series. We hardly knew ye. All right, well, we're at 1:15, and we do not want to do what this director did, and that's run past our scheduled time.
Fortunately, we've got an editor. I don't remember his name, but I think he'd be a better one than the one for Final Wars, who is listed on Wikipedia. But let me say his name, the editor here.
Do we want to shame him like that?
Yes. Suichi Kaikisu. Shame on you, Kikisu. Shame on you.
All right. Well, I think you should shame the director as well.
Shame on you! I gotta look the name up again. Hold on. Kitamura? No kidding, Kitamura. Shame on you. But I did enjoy the aliens. And I actually do appreciate a lot about this movie. I just, maybe not all in a 2-hour block. So, thanks, but do better.
Yeah.
Don't
I mean,
do Godzilla again, maybe, but do a TV show episode.
It's a movie where it's a shame that it was as bad as it was.
Eh.
Because it shouldn't have been. Like, this should have been a home run. Like, an easy one. No one even cared if there was a plot. They just wanted to see monsters fighting. It's like,
we should echo the words of the old grandpa dressed up as a bear when he tells Godzilla, "It's over. Forgive them." That's what I think we should do.
agreed. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.